Hey, welcome again to Mythborn Live. I think we're at episode 28, but I'll fix that too if we're not. And but I did notice today when I was on that we have done 47 videos or something like that. So I'm gonna go look through all my videos. I know that they're put on different different playlists, but I may have not moved all the videos I've done so that they all appear on Mythborn Live. My goal is to have everything I've done on Mythborn Live and then have some of the other categories splitting out areas of interest for people. So this is going to be episode 28. We're going to talk about John Titor, and we're going to talk about the book and as it stands. Clearly, you guys know I've had a few technical problems, which I still have not solved, but I will because I am like that, so I'll figure it out. But in the meantime, so what's interesting about John Titor, and it might make sense actually for me to give you guys a little bit of background on who John Titor was. Not everybody knows, and frankly, it's not like, like I said, my goal here is to be skeptical, to add some information to the opportunity for us to, have an interesting discourse, to show you how that might influence my writing in Mythborn. But really, ultimately, in the end, it's hard to just take most of this stuff at face value. It feels like a lot of it might just be, hoax or whatever. I bring the things up to you guys, my fans, because I find that sometimes people don't put a lot of scientific rigor into their decision that it's a hoax or their decision that it's real. So I like to get a little deeper into the subject matter and then provide, an answer as to which way I think it sort of is leaning. But I urge you guys to make your own decisions. All the information on John Titor, Titor, is online. You can find it anywhere. Let's go back to around 2000, year 2000, in November. And on a chat channel, you gotta remember that time Google was not like this ginormous thing. People were still on, message boards, discussion boards on the internet. You didn't really get a lot of like the kind of stuff you see now today. And a guy named John Titor logs into this thing. He starts with this, I'm not gonna get it exactly right, but he starts with this thing saying, "Greetings, I'm a time traveler from the year 2036. And I'm on my way home after getting an IBM 5100 computer system from the year 1975. Here's what's interesting. The machine he's talking about, it was widely known, but what was not widely known about it was part of his explanation of why he wanted that machine. He basically said that he was going back into that time period because there had been a virus that had disabled Unix systems in the year 2030, or will disable Unix systems in the year 2038. And in order to stop that virus from screwing everything up, they needed to recode some of their things. Think about it sort of a little bit like Y2K, what we thought about in 1999 might happen, but this is instead in 2038. And what's weird is he said that the reason he needed to get an IBM 5100 computer from 1975 was because that computer happened to have the ability to read a number of different types of code. NASA had to buy outdated medical equipment on eBay just so it could scavenge their obsolete Intel 8086 chips from their booster testing engines and machines, and even the Orion spacecraft. So it's not crazy, right? The idea here is that NASA couldn't read the systems that they had built so long ago because they didn't know machines that could read that format anymore. So he went back to get this machine, and then his goal was to come back to the future, not trying to do a pun, but head back to 2036, where they would solve this problem with Unix machines and Unix code, thereby preventing sort of a collapse of their technological infrastructure, which had already taken a huge beating after World War III had happened. Now, and he had stopped in the year 2000, I guess, on the way back to say hello, to do some stuff that were on a personal nature with his family, retrieve some photographs from his parents, and then he had also left this message on the board. Now, here's the interesting thing about this place that he showed up in. He didn't offer any predictions really that would make anyone rich. Like, he didn't tell you who's going to win the World Series. He didn't do anything that people might benefit from. He basically, all he did was really, really, really focus on the future and not about specific things that would make anyone, better off or worse off. He also had pictures of this time machine that he used. It was made by General Electric. It had diagrams in it. The diagrams weren't labeled. But interestingly enough, very recently, a patent has been filed using those pictures and that same technology that was described by him to create or to have a patent on time displacement. Here's what is interesting. Not only did he not give away a ton of information that would have benefited anybody, but no one ever found out who he was. Ultimately, he was on this board for a few times, and then he said he's leaving. He wanted to thank everybody, and then he left. And we've never heard again from him. So it's been 18 years. Never came on. No hoaxer came up and said, it was me. No one published a book that made money off of it. It was like he appeared, he said a couple of things, and then he left. Now, here's the parts. All of this I would dismiss. I would say great hoaxer, well planned. He thought it out. The guy wasn't dumb. The guy he thought out all the ways in which he could seal off anyone checking on him, and then he pulled it off. And he pulled it off at a time when it's pretty easy to get on these BBB boards and posting to a bunch of people. And there's no video, there's no imagery like that. And he's gone. But here's the things that I still scratch my head about, and I'm open to comments from people, to fix it. Number one, the machine he suggested, the 5100, it does happen to have a unique ability to read multiple different codes. And that machine, the fact that it could do that was actually a closely guarded secret at IBM, because they were worried that the later machines that they were making that didn't have that ability, their sales would be affected by this earlier machine's capabilities. Imagine, we've seen this all the time. People make the first or second rendition is much better, and then as soon as they find out they're giving away too much for the money, they start stripping away, features and things like that. So, we see it actually on Twitter right now. And so, it's like one of those weird situations where he picked a machine. And at that time in the year 2000, there may have been, I think I looked a couple of different sources, and they estimate maybe 14 or 15 people knew about that capability in the world. So that's one interesting thing. Maybe he's one of those 14 or 15. Okay. The second interesting thing is said that because of a continuing growth in the reduction of our freedoms, there had been a schism between the federal government and local governments, state level governments. And as a result, the United States in the early 2012 and 13 or maybe 2010 around there had entered a civil war that accumulated around 2015 when they were attacked by Russia and China, wiping out Washington, D.C. and Florida. And what was left was a confederation of 5 republics that made up what was the United States. Now, the other thing he said, before you say, it's already 2018, that hasn't happened, he said, look, the many worlds theory of time travel is true. It's what goes on. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. I personally think it probably is true. So my ears perked up at this. But a great example was if you ever watch Star Trek Next Generation, there's an episode where Worf keeps jumping timelines, and in some he seems going up in rank. In one, he's married to Deanna. In another, he's not. All the timelines are sort of close, but they're not exactly close. There's also a book called Mainline, and I really recommend you read it. I should actually. It's by Deborah Christian, and Reva, this assassin for hire, can slip between alternate timelines to evade detection. They're never quite in sync, so she could basically step into a timeline where the person who is trying to track her might be a minute earlier, a minute later, they wouldn't be there. Well, what's interesting in the book is she can't, there's so many timelines according to the theory of many worlds theory, where essentially it says that every time you take an action, every action, all the time, the reality of our world splits, and both outcomes happen. So because that would create billions upon billions of realities, the idea of slipping from one to the next and finding the one you just came from, you'll never do it, right? And so Reva's big problem she learned when she was a child and wished her parents, wanted to get away from her parents. She got away and she jumped so far that she never found them again, right? And so she's always been trying to get back closer to like the place where she was with them, but she can't. And interestingly, what Titor was saying was that actually is true. So by coming back and getting this computer and then jumping back again to his time, he wasn't going back to his exact time. He was going back to a time close to his. But they were hoping that by grabbing the computer, as he moved forward, timelines would diverge enough that by the time he got back, maybe the reality he comes back to isn't even, the one that he left, where no world war happened, or where the war, was avoided, or where, maybe it was delayed. What I find interesting about that is where we are right now. There is a schism happening between federal level government and the state level sort of territories, and it's a problem that's really focused around freedom, around different kinds of discrimination, immigration. There are so many things happening right now that are leading closer, that are painting a picture of a United States that is more and more at odds with each other, internally at odds. And imagine this. Imagine if for some reason we had a ruler, and I don't want to call them a president because the president wouldn't do this, but if someone decided they weren't going to step down, or someone decided that something was off, or they had been cheated, or that something else was wrong, there would be a following of people that would follow that person, and there would be a civil war, right? There would be a problem within, the United States. So what scared me all of a sudden is I started looking through some of the Titor predictions. They weren't exact in terms of timing, but they were oddly close in terms of sentiment. He mentioned that a building had been lost in New York, not two buildings, just a building. Maybe in his timeline it was just one. Maybe one of the towers didn't fall. We don't know. He didn't say which one. He didn't want to change the world as it was here today. If you do some research, there are a couple of other things that are interesting about some of the things he said. When you remove the need for it to have happened in the year that he said exactly, if you look at how the many worlds theory is presented, there is a possibility of a slip, and there is a possibility of not everything being exactly lined up in the two timelines all the time. He said there was a 1.5% to 2% divergence between the time he left from and ours, but after coming back and getting stuff and moving forward again, who knows? I mean, the divergence could be even more. Sometimes wonder, are we seeing that John Titor timeline just extended for us, or maybe just slowed down a little for us? And that's just a sort of a chilling thought. And so I urge you guys, again, my show is about how this kind of stuff can affect me as a writer or Mythborn or things like that. I don't, want to make it a show about mysteries and things like that, because there are people out there who spend a lot of time doing that. If you haven't already, you subscribe to my channel, but also to Jimmy over at Bright Insights. He's really interesting to listen to. He does a lot of great research into this stuff, and I think he's really worth just giving an eye if you like this kind of stuff. I mean, he's certainly someone who takes the time to come up with what's going on and then provide that for everyone. So I think that's great. I feel like there's some portions of the John Titor thing that just smack a little bit close to home now, right? So one of the things he said, that after the war happens, a limited nuclear exchange with Russia kills about 3 million people here in the US. Maybe historians will say that's a very easy guess to make. He said that after the devastation of DC and some of the places in Florida, these rural countrysides became almost like communities. There were people were a lot closer. They stayed sort of together. They you sort of moved from maybe one small community to another, but it really was about providing. It wasn't about big business. Some people chose to stay in the cities, and they gave up their freedoms, many of their freedoms, with regards to immigration and rights and stuff. But in return, they had a big wall, and they had soldiers, and they had guns, and people would protect them. Big wall, big wall, big wall. You never knew what might happen. It's interesting thing there. It's a lot of cool diagrams, and he said that his time displacement unit was run by 2 micro black holes. And what's interesting is that the technology he's talking about today, there are people who say that would be a way you could create a slip in time. But back in 2000, when he said this, that wasn't really super well known. There wasn't like CERN had not yet kicked up. We didn't yet have some of the information about the subatomic particles and that particle fields to understand how some of the stuff works. When Titor claimed that the 5100 was needed, a guy named Bob Dubke, an engineer who helped design it, he confirmed that such a feature existed. The 5100 had the rare ability to emulate programs in older languages used by IBM mainframes. The biggest thing I always find interesting to me when it comes to the media and when it comes to the way in which we are managed by the media, it's normal. The media outlet is how we get our information, and that information and how we get it is a function of how our governments and how media parties and how news casters and everyone else, how they want us to feel, right? So they're not doing anything evil by doing that. For the most part, I think everyone's efforts are laudable, and they're not trying anything. But I think that ultimately, if you're a government and you need to protect your citizenry, that you can probably find a very easy justification for managing media information. What's interesting to me, though, is in all this time, since 2000 to now, 18 years, not only have we never seen him again, but the rhetoric about him, which had initially been about sort of uncovering and trying to figure out who he was and all this other stuff, has slowly bent more and more to it being a total hoax. And I just wonder why everyone seems to be so focused on saying that. Like, I wonder why that's so important, because you could have just let the story die. It's not like you have to go out there and be, commenting on things that this is a hoax and blah, 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 blah. So, what do they say? Methinks thou protestest too much. So anyways, I found that interesting. It does have bearing on how Mythborn sort of comes about. There's an interesting sort of time level kind of paradox that doesn't really reveal itself to the very end. I feel like there's a lot of effort to go back a certain distance and then stop, right? We get a lot of pushback the moment you suggest that there might have been a advanced civilization on the earth before the Egyptians. There seems to be a lot of push from the academic level people to not, reveal what's going on, before that. So that's why I urge you guys to, look through what you can, do your own research and come up with your own conclusions. No one here is suggesting that John Titor's story is true. I just as a science-minded person, I just question a few of the ways in which you would normally see a hoax like this perpetrated, and then the beneficiaries of that hoax. And because it's hard to find that, it makes me more inclined to question some of the messaging behind it and things like that. So I wanted to talk about something that I just saw on Bright Insights, and I urge you guys to see this, which is the Eye of the Sahara, the ReCat. It's a structure that looks like a giant eye, and it may in fact be a remnant of Atlantis. So, we'll talk about that next time. And listen, as always, it's great hanging out with you guys. I look forward to this every week. And I'm going to try, I think, and up maybe some of these videos to a few more times, maybe something in the evenings too. And that way, if people miss a show, they can always catch it. You can always catch our recordings. It's on YouTube, but you can always catch the live ones too. And feel free to join. Please subscribe. I'm gonna go over this way this time, maybe this way. No, it comes up at the end of my video. It'll be like some kind of little square. Just it'll be a circle that looks like the book cover. Just click that. That'll subscribe you to the channel, I think. And I'll see you guys at the Barnes & Noble November 10th. That's only 10 days away. Watch my Facebook feeds and watch the rest of the stuff to see what exactly is going on. And until then, I'm gonna say adios. Take care, guys.